Now we have understood the different types of tasks which we have entered. But before I move on to the slide of dependencies, I just want to give you a few tips and few features that you might want to use. This was just a demo, so as you can see, I just hardly have around 17 tasks in my project. But generally, the projects which all of you manage will have at least 1,000 or no, more than 500 activities. So it's quite difficult to find out how many milestones you are having. It's quite difficult to understand how many phases you are having in your project. So this is when you might want to make use of the view ribbon, which we have seen on session 1. I hope you guys can see there is on the data group, you can see there is an outline option through which you can try to hide and expand the different levels in your WBS. Let's say if I say show outline level 1, it will give me only the level 1 and the level 0 of your WBS, which means your project summary task and the level that comes immediately below that. If I just want to look at level 2, the moment I say level 2, it gives you level 2, level 1, and the level 0. Okay, so this is what we typically do. The second one is you might want to, I can say, group your activities, what you have entered so far, by milestones and other activities. This is when you might want to make use of the group option. You can say group by milestones. So the moment you say group by milestones, you can see one group is having all milestones yes, another group is having milestone no. There would be one type of task that will be missing in this group, that is your summary activities or your phases in the project, because that will not generally included when you are trying to do a grouping. Okay. Another one is you have something called filters, where you can say I want to filter, I want to see only milestones in my project, so you can see only my milestones. But if you want to find out only those tasks which are having constraints attached, you might want to make use of the same filters, where you might want to go for more filters here. On the more filters, you can find there is an option called task with fixed dates. When I say fixed dates, dates that are not flexible enough. So let me say apply, or I can even say highlight. Let me say highlight here. You can see it will just tell you only those tasks will be highlighted that has constraints associated with it. That's good. So this is something which you just need to remember when you are trying to make use of filters and groups. But I hope all of us do remember when we started the session, I was talking about what we called as the WBS codes. So far I have not talked about WBS codes here. So when you double click every task here on your advanced tab, you can see there is a small WBS code available. Okay, so the WBS code. So let me double click my identify stakeholders. You can see it says sample 1. Sample 1 is the name of the project and it's followed by star here. So if I go to the project ribbon, I hope all of us remember there are 3 levels. One is number, another is characters, and the third one is this. And let me say okay. And I will just insert this column so that you guys can see it now. So this is ideally the sample data. So my level 0 is having my name of the project. You can also see the level 1. The level 1 of my WBS is having only sample followed by a numerical number like 1, 7, and 9. If you want to provide a different number, you are free to do it. But the key point is the WBS code should be unique. Okay, so you can just give a different code here. And if you look at requirements, you can just give a, so the moment you said out sample 1, you can see all its style will have sample 1. And as per my WBS code, I've said the second level should be characters. So I can ideally say here for my identify stakeholders, I can say identify, and for the second one I will say workshop. For the third one I will say responsibility matrix. So you can have your own WBS codes. So at a later point in time you want to group your activities by WBS. So this might be quite useful for you. So let me show all my tasks here, and let me hide this column. Good. Okay, good. So the next type of content what we are going to look at is the different dependency types. I hope you know between any two tasks you can have one of these four dependency types. To start with, you have a dependency called as finish to start. A finish to start ideally means only when the first activity finishes, the second activity starts. In this example, you have a research and a review. As you can see the arrow that connects the research and review. The tail of the arrow is pointing to the finish, the head of the arrow is pointing to the review, which means there is a finish to start between review and maybe the research and review. The second type of dependency is start to start, which means only when the first activity starts, the second activity can start on or after the particular date. For example, let's say we have a workshop and we also have a building a prototype. So the way in which the project is structured is, as the workshop is conducted, a prototype is going to be parallelly developed. So if the workshop is going to be delayed, naturally I cannot start preparing a prototype because the workshop is giving feeding information for my prototype development. So here you can see the start of workshop is connected to the start of building prototype. So this is an example for start to start. The third one is a finish to finish, where you say only when the first activity finishes, the second activity can finish on or after a particular date. A very simple example is testing and acceptance. You have a testing activity. As you can see, it's only in the fag end the customer starts accepting your product. So one way is you can say only when it is completely tested you can try to accept it. The second way is maybe when majority or most of the testing work is completed, you can start doing your acceptance testing, which means you might want to say there is when the testing finishes, you want your acceptance to also finish on or after a particular date. So this is an example for finish to finish. And the last one might look a bit peculiar. It is called as a start to finish. But generally, if you look at the last three dependencies, you can see your predecessor is before time and your successor is after time. So predecessor we generally say previous and successor we say next. But the true definition of a predecessor is any activity that drives other activities called as the predecessor. If you look at start to start, both these activities are parallel activities. So nothing is happening on the past or nothing is happening in the future. Both are parallel tasks. So the workshop is driving the prototype development. So the workshop is the predecessor, whereas building prototype is my successor. If you look at the finish to finish, my testing is my predecessor, my acceptance is my successor, which means if my testing is going to be late, naturally my acceptance is also going to finish late, which is both are tied on a finish to finish dependency. Whereas a start to finish dependency is more like this. Let's say you have two tasks, integration and testing. The customer says integration should ideally start on Friday. Okay, so which means he has already given you a date, which means it cannot be pushed earlier or after that date. So depending on when your integration is starting, naturally your testing should finish just the earlier date. In this example, if you look at it, integration start date is driving the finish date of my testing. So in this example, it is a start to finish dependency. So though we have four dependency types, but between any two tasks, you can have only one of these four in project 2010. And by default, you can have only the finish to start dependency between any two tasks. So let's look at a few examples of how to set these dependencies.